Well, hello class, and welcome to the second week of Unit 5. Hope you're doing well. Great job so far. This unit, hey, a couple things I want to do. I wanted to, really, I guess, in this video, I'm going to do two of them this evening. I want to share with you some about the upcoming assignment that's due for the vocation and calling paper, okay? So, and I want to give some more specifics because one of the things that I find happens on, I would say, a pretty regular basis with this paper is that there's a pretty wide chasm. There's a discrepancy between the quality of paper that I see come in. And let me just kind of tell you my goal is this is really the first formal paper. The first one is your well-being response was more of just what do you think about that paper. But this is really a formal academic paper. Okay, so I want you to leave out any first-person language. Okay, there's no place for first-person language in an academic paper. So not I felt, I believe, I would use this. Those are nice, but that's not what I'm asking for. Okay, so please leave that content out. What I am also asking you to do is make sure that you read the assignment prompt. Okay, so the assignment prompt is very clear in the actual syllabus itself. If you go to the actual assignment itself in Canvas, you'll find that there's another document that's been copied and actually inserted there, and that's the assignment itself. Okay, so that's what I'm asking you to do. And what I find is I get these papers that it either would appear that the student didn't read the assignment, and so they're just completely off, don't know what they're really kind of writing about, or they write an amazing paper, or they write a pretty good paper. Okay, so there's usually those three, and it's just kind of, you've got almost an equal number, amazing, I'm not sure what's happening, and right in between with some good and some not so good. Okay. So I think if you spend a lot of time reading the assignment prompt, you'll really kind of get the idea of what I'm looking for. Leave first-person language out of there. This is an This is an analysis, okay, a critical analysis piece. There's a synthesis. We're really operating. There's a reason I put into the syllabus Bloom's taxonomy of learning. We're at the top. We're looking at some of these top. We're looking at analysis and synthesis. Not kind of this bottom level content. I really want to see how you look at these things in tandem. Okay, so the method behind the madness, I guess I would say, is when I teach two career classes now currently. Now that I'm in a new position, I'm no longer full-time at APU, and I'm adjunct. I teach in two departments. I teach the Career Development Theories and Techniques course for the Marriage and Family Therapy program, and I teach the Understanding Vocation in a Changing World course for the Master of Arts in Leadership program. Okay, and when I teach the career development class, I bring in elements of vocation. When I teach the vocation class, I bring in elements of career development. And I do that very intentionally because I don't think that you can actually get at the core issue of what we're dealing with if we don't look at the holistic picture. Okay, if we don't look at both vocation and career development. Okay, so now APU, obviously, this is a Christian institution, and so a lot of what we're teaching is going to be from that kind of faith-based lens or perspective. And so this idea of vocation does date back really to the Reformation. So now 501 years ago, as we come up on the 501st anniversary, which is tomorrow, Halloween, or some would call it Reformation Day. So there's underpinnings. This idea of vocation is really kind of steeped in this doctrine of vocation from Martin Luther. But I think that there's so much more to it than limiting just to kind of having this Christian conversation. I think the idea of vocation is really important across the board. But here's what I don't want you to miss out on. And I don't want you to, I guess I would say, use the wrong descriptors or words to talk about what it is that you're talking about, okay? So I want you to hear me very clearly that this idea of vocation is not to be used, or the word vocation, the word calling, is not to be used as an interchangeable terminology for occupation, okay? So when we hear people say, well, vocationally I do this, I think that's actually a bit of a misnomer, okay? I don't think that that's actually what we're getting at when we talk about vocation. So if you go back to the doctrine of vocation, vocation is talking about the different stations of vocation. So I'm in my one of my stations of vocation is to work as a career strategist for the Drucker School. Another station of vocation is that of husband and father and son and brother and friend and member of a church, right? So there's all these different stations of vocation. But we have come to a place today where we refer to vocation as being basically akin to, if not exactly the same as, occupation. Okay? So what I don't want to hear you doing in these papers is talking about vocation as occupation. Vocation is something much deeper, right? This idea of calling is something much deeper. And the books that you're reading, so this idea that some of you are reading Dick and Duffy's book, Make Your Job a Calling, gets at a lot of this, right? So Brian Dick is in fact, he is in fact a Christian. I don't know where Ryan Duffy stands from a faith standpoint, but Brian Dick is. He's a full professor at Colorado State University doing amazing work out there. And so he's writing this from a perspective where it's for the masses, but he's going to actually bring in some content from a faith-based perspective. One of the examples he gives is that of a person who is a police officer who ends up wanting to go into ministry, right? So that's such a drastic call. But here's what happens when we start to talk about vocation as occupation. We start to separate out, or we use terms like vocational ministry, okay? So, and what we mean by that is they're pastor full-time. Well, for me, I'm not a pastor full-time. In fact, I'm not an elder. I go to church, I'm a member there. But my vocation happens to be vocational educational ministry. That's what I'm doing in this role. So I want you to really think really intentionally and carefully about the words that you're using in this paper, okay? I want us just to read through the description. So you have chosen your book. So, and I would say too, some of you are reading Parker Palmer's book, and Palmer's going to have a slightly different take on this whole idea and these concepts as Dick and Duffy will have. Similar, Jeff Goins will have a different take. All of these people have different takes and understandings on this idea of calling and vocation. But I want you to really look at where do these things intersect. Okay, so let's just read through the description. Students will choose from a list of 5 books. So whatever book you want to, you'll choose from that. And there's actually more of them than even those 5. Read through the book. And between units 2 and 5, and you write the paper in unit 6. It's a 3 to 5 page paper. Again, not counting your cover page or your references. And it's going to be an analysis of the role that the ideas of vocation and calling play within the greater context of career development. Okay, so what does someone's idea of calling play within the role of career development? So you're going through this process. We're going to enter into the different kind of stages with, early adulthood, emergent adulthood, and then adulthood, and even before they have high school and junior high and middle school, and elementary school and childhood, career development, all of these things. And so for some of us, we may say, I feel like I was called to be something, okay? What is it that you would say you feel called to be? For me, I worked in ministry, but I don't feel like I'm called to be in ministry. In fact, I'm doing the job that I'm doing now. I'm a professor, I'm doing all these things, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I feel called to do that, okay? There are certain things that I feel called to do, and one of them is I feel called to be a really good employee. I feel called to be a really good colleague. I feel called to be a really good father and a really good husband and a really good contributing member of my church community. But to do something specific, my calling is not necessarily how I would understand it. It's not necessarily my job. I'm called to do certain things within that. And here's the thing, my calling might change, or my career might change, but my calling never does, okay? Annie F. Downs is a speaker and author and teacher, and she says for her calling, she sees it as being one calling that shows itself in multiple expressions. So she's called to do this, she says, this one thing. And for her, the one thing she's called to do, she feels like, I'm called to be the friend that hangs around just long enough for you to learn something. For me, I feel like my calling is to know as much as I possibly can so that I can give that information away to other people to make them look good. That's kind of a mouthful, right? So someone I'm a fan of his writing, Andy Crouch, he says that his calling is to make complicated things easy to understand in short amounts of time for people who don't have a lot of time to understand complicated things. But that calling can look different in different environments, right? So he was a book author, so he's taking these complex ideas and he's condensing them into, 200 pages. He was an executive editor of a magazine, so he's taking really complex ideas and editing them down to maybe even 800 words or something like that. He was a strategist, a communication strategist. So he was taking really complicated things and condensing them down and making them complicated for people like you and me that don't have time to understand those complicated things. And now he's a principal consultant of sorts for an organization called Praxis. And he's helping people to think from a faith-based perspective on how they can do entrepreneurship for the common good. That's a big, big idea. And yet for him, he's making that somewhat less complicated and condensing it into short amounts of time so that all of us people can understand what it is he's talking about. Okay, so think about it through that lens. Okay, and I would say this, please, and I wrote in the assignment, don't approach the writing of this paper without giving your response a good deal of thought and consideration. Right, storyboard it out. Write about some things. What are some things that stood out to you in the vocation and calling book of your choice? What are some areas you see them connecting? Okay, so one thing to keep in mind regarding career counseling and career development is that the sole purpose of providing career counseling, hear this is really important, is not to simply help the client find a new job. Okay, it can't be. If that's all we're doing is just helping them find a new job, then I guarantee you that the person that you help to only find a new job will end up coming back in 6 to 12 months to you or somebody else because they hate that job. There's always more to it. Okay, so that's when I work with clients, my approach is much more in depth. I'm getting at both the calling and the vocation component as well as the career development component. Okay. So each of these books that you're reading has a good deal of similarity as it compares to other choices, but they also have their own unique kind of distinct appeal and flair and approach to these ideas, okay? So take your time. There is so much to this process, okay? These ideas of vocation and calling, they are something to consider while making this realization, something to consider as you think about career development, okay? So hear this. In addition to referencing your book of choice, at least 2 peer-reviewed journal articles and or books must be cited, okay? Use the online library resources. Citations from Wikipedia and other non-academic references, magazines, online resources, etc. will not count towards the required citations, though you can include them if they are supportive of the overall thesis of the paper, okay? Paper should be written in APA format, including the writing head, cover page, and references page, okay? If they are over 5 pages in length, you'll receive a reduction in grade, okay? So I want you to hear this next part really carefully. What can you use out of this class for those peer-reviewed journals or articles or books? Can you use the well-being book? No, okay? The well-being text is more of a pop book, okay? It's important, it's a great assessment, but it's not necessarily an academic type book like your Anderson and Van de Heet or your Liptak texts are. So you need to use 2 of them. So could you potentially use Anderson and Van de Heet and Liptak? Yes, absolutely. Could you use some of the articles that we've looked at so far? Maybe, okay? So the excerpt that I've included from Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, cannot be used because it's not an academic book, okay? It's more of a pop psychology book in some ways, pop sociology book. It's a great book. I love the book, but it's not academic-y in nature, okay? So really think about this. Think about how you kind of communicate the story. Don't give me a book report. Don't give me a synopsis. Don't give me, I guess really those are the 2 things. You want to provide an overview of sorts, but then you really want to infuse them. Where's the connection? Where's the synthesis of vocation and calling and career development as you see it in the books we've read, in the articles we've read, and things that maybe you even come across, okay? And I want to say one other thing. I used to have a rubric, so if you look at the description, it's actually in the assignment tab. There's a rubric in there. I don't use that anymore because what I found is that students would write to the rubric and they wouldn't write to the assignment. So I've done away with the rubric, and all we're doing is focusing on the assignment itself, okay? So we now have a couple of weeks before it's due. Please, if you have questions, call me, email me, send me a note in Canvas, but ask them earlier than later, because I inevitably, you're going to wait until the last minute and then write me an email 2 days before it's due, and I may not have a chance to get back to you, okay? So it's a great paper. I hope you have a lot of fun with it, and if you have any questions, please ask, because I want you to know I'm here to support you and make sure that you're successful in this paper.